I call this order of the City of Siloam Springs Planning Commission to order. Before we get roll call, anyone that has a cell phone or recording device, please turn it to do not disturb or turn it off. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Roll call.
Long,
Here.
Montgomery,
Here.
Sally, McKinney,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
Kenzie.
Here.
You've all received minutes from the last meeting of March the 9th, 2021. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the minutes as published. Roll call.
Montgomery.
Here.
Sally. McKinney,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Kenzie,
Yes.
Song.
Yes.
First item on tonight's agenda is significant development permit SD 2103. Ben?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. So before you is a significant development permit. This is occurring at 22,000 block of Highway 16. This is a vacant field located just behind the existing warehouse on Highway 16 that is located across from Dayspring Cards in their corporate office. The proposal is for a new warehouse / industrial shops. Here you see the full site plan. The current proposal is only one of the areas shown that's in the red circle. So the additional buildings will come online when there's demand for them. The developer doesn't want to be committed to building these in the near term when the approval for construction expires after 1 year after approval at the board. So therefore, it's anticipated the developer will return to the Planning Commission and board for future projects as these different buildings will come online. So for right now, we're just looking at one of the buildings of the 5 that are being built. So here is the landscape plan. This also includes landscape islands as well as landscaping within the parking area. And then here we see an elevation view. Essentially what, this is an actual photo, but it would be basically what the buildings will look like. They will have roll-up doors for each unit as they're being occupied for different workspaces. For this next slide, this is just showing what this will look like when overlaid onto the existing environment. Again, with the access, of course, coming off of Highway 16 along that dogleg to the main facility right there. And lastly, here's the site view. This is looking to the north with Highway 16 to the right. Staff is recommending approval with 2 conditions. First is on needed sidewalk fee due to the limited space along the highway. They're paying a fee in lieu rather than just building a little snippet of segment of sidewalk. And the second is on the need for an off-site utility easement. And with that, we stand ready for any of your questions. Thank you.
Your representative here of the builder. Would you like to speak? Questions from the commissioners? If there's no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve significant development 21-03, subject to the following conditions. The applicant shall pay a sidewalk fee prior to building permit issuance. projected to be around $335.11. The applicant shall dedicate off-site utility and drainage easement for sewer main extension and drainage ditch via separate instrument prior to building permit issuance.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. A roll call.
Sally,
Yes.
Kenny,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Song,
Yes.
Montgomery.
Yes.
Motion is approved. This will go to the board on May the 4th. Next item on the agenda is a preliminary plat development permit PP 2101, 6700 block of East Lake Francis Drive. Ben?
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chairman and Commission. So for your next agenda item, you're looking at a preliminary plat development permit. As the chairman stated, it's 700 block of Lake Francis Drive. The request is to subdivide the property into 12 two-family lots. However, one of these lots will be dedicated as the detention basin, so there'll be a total of 11 lots available in the development for future housing. Here you can see the proposed site plan. The detention basin I mentioned is shown here on lot 10. And the cul-de-sac aligns with Aspen Street from the Woodlands addition. The street meets all fire code standards and does not require any secondary egress or ingress into the development. I also want to point out that the applicant has elected at staff's request to erect a privacy fence at the back end of the cul-de-sac, as I circle right there. And what that will do is that will screen vehicles as they come down from shining their lights in the back of the houses that are on the other side that are to the west of the subdivision, because as you can see from the next view here, there's no fencing of any kind existing. So the future cul-de-sac will essentially come up here, come right across, and right there. And there's nothing blocking the end of that cul-de-sac to the backs of these houses or these structures. So that's why we're going to have the fence there to help block that. So we are recommending some conditions with this. The first condition is on paying the sidewalk fee in lieu of paving a new sidewalk along Lake Francis Drive. In addition, we are requesting a special fee for the half-street improvements for Lake Francis. Staff requested this fee as there are plans in the works to redo Lake Francis in 2022. And adding a sidewalk now would likely require its removal once the street has been upgraded with the curb and gutter and all the requirements that have to go in with that. The applicant also reserves the option to construct that half-street improvement rather than paying the fee if so desired. After some additional looking into the calculations by staff and the applicant, the figure has been revised down from what was shown in the staff report. So the new figure is $90,970.96. So when making the recommendation, if you do choose to do so, please reference that figure. Again, that's $90,970.96. The second condition is on inquiring a needed sewer line easement to the east of Aslan Court that's needed to provide sewer to this project. On April 12th, staff received a phone call in opposition of the request on account of the traffic and the quality of the road. Staff did inform the caller that Lake Francis is on the docket for improvement next year. This project will be subject to city board approval, of course. And with that, we are available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Anyone from the audience got input? Please come to the microphone, give your name and your address.
My name is Judy Saferight. I live on East Cypress Court, which is accessed by Aspen. And my question is, when you get this done, if you do this, are you going to have parking along Lake Francis, on actual Lake Francis?
According to the map, parking is inside the development at the homes. Correct, Ben?
That's correct. There wouldn't be parking on Lake Francis. It would be, you know, at the driveways, you know, or along the street for the future street cul-de-sac if they chose to do that, but wouldn't be doing parking on Lake Francis itself.
Aspen is really hard to get in and out of. You can see in these pictures here, people park on either side of Aspen, and so two cars cannot pass on Aspen with the way the cars are parked there. So when you come to the corner of Lake Francis there, it's really hard to, somebody will be trying to turn into Aspen and you're trying to exit Aspen, and it's just a little, even without all that addition there, it's a hard place to be coming in and out of. So I don't know how you can correct that, but something needs to be fixed for that. That Aspen is just not a wide enough street, and if the new street is the same width as Aspen, it's going to just cause more problems.
Ma'am, before you sit down, tell me your name again.
Judy
What's your-
Saferight,
Safe right?
Saferite.
Your address was what?
I live on East Cypress Court,
Is there a house number?
726.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Ben, do you want to address that further?
Sorry, what was the question?
I'm trying to understand her question. In my mind, if the development where Aspen's gonna go on through there, I wouldn't see where it would affect the intersection there other than the stop sign coming onto Lake Francis.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, what will change, if I can go back to here, is this will essentially become an intersection rather than a T intersection as is now. The street width would be the same as on Aspen. I mean, that's a standard 50-foot right of way. I believe 27 square or 27, 28. 30 feet, okay, 30 feet in width, so.
Thank you, Ben. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, and perhaps Ben can speak to this, would it be normal practice to turn that into a four-way once there's that new intersection crossing? Or would it be stopped from both sides of Aspen, but Francis would still be straight through?
I wouldn't want to, it's a good question. I wouldn't want to speak out of turn for Justin, but I would think it would be stops on just the side streets with Lake Francis as a through, but I'll let Justin discuss that.
Just chime in real quickly. Justin Blancett, engineer. Yeah, Ben's right. We follow, there's some typical guidelines for when a four-way stop is warranted, and a lot of that has to do with the side traffic has to reach a certain percentage of that, which is probably unlikely because there's so much traffic on Lake Francis.
I think I heard you right, that there are plans to improve Lake Francis in 2022?
That's
I
correct,
guess
yeah.
that would also be when they're gonna be building that addition, I would assume. I think I saw that there was an expiration for this if they didn't begin
That's,
a certain date in 2022, so you don't foresee any issues with the road being improved at the same time the construction's going on for the
that,
new addition?
yeah, that's a very good question. I honestly have not thought about that. I don't know when the applicant would be wanting to go underway versus when the city would potentially be starting the project. Do you happen to know when they would start next year?
Great, I'll deal with you.
Okay, Ron would have to talk to the project itself. I think, these things are kind of fluid. It's scheduled for next year. I think that, I think right now it's like the third and fourth quarter, so it'd be the end of next year is what I think the city's plan is.
Ron Homeyer, Civil Engineering, 701 South Mount Olive. As far as when the developer plans to begin, it's not going to be immediately. He's contemplating doing something else in the meantime. But if it's going to be third or fourth quarter of 2022, then he's going to have to start construction before the city does, or else he's going to have to come back to get a renewal of his permit.
Any other questions?
That new sidewalk fee was 95 or 97, 90,970. So that does not have to be paid until they're ready to get their final plat issued, correct?
Yeah, let me look at the wording of the condition here, 1 second.
Prior to final plat issuance.
Yes, so that would be, so they would pay that before the city would issue the final plat for recordation. So essentially before the board of directors votes on the final plat. So they have a good bit of time. They'd have to build the whole subdivision first and then come back with the final plat.
So in theory, if the developer wanted to construct the same improvements himself, that would be something the city would kind of come alongside him and make sure he was doing up to code.
That would be correct. I'm getting the nod from Justin, so yeah.
All right, good.
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question. So I heard that Lake Francis will be improved. So what does that mean? So what's the improvement?
Justin Bland, city engineer. There's some structural issues with the road. There's a lot of potholes.
Okay.
And then further east of here, there's a really sharp S curve. So we're planning on widening the road, adding curb and gutter, and then also trying to straighten out that S curve so it's not so dramatic there before the railroad track starts.
All right, thank you.
Any other input from the commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Chairman, I move we approve a preliminary plat development permit PP 2101, subject to the conditions that the applicant pay the half-street improvement and the sidewalk fee projected to be $90,970.96, or construct the same improvements to a city standard prior to the final plat issuance, and that the applicant shall acquire all necessary off-site utility easements prior to beginning construction.
Second.
Who was that?
Motion and a second.
Thank you.
Roll call.
McKinney,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Kenzie,
Yes.
Song,
Yes.
Montgomery,
Yes.
Sally.
Yes.
Motion is approved. This will go to the board on May the 4th. Next item on the agenda is rezoning development permit RZ 2102, Ben Rhodes.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commission. So for your last development permit approval, you are considering a rezoning request to rezone the property at the 800 and 900 block of South Washington Street from C2 and R2 to R4 multifamily. It should be noted that this is the same property that the Planning Commission reviewed last May. Only at that time, the request was to rezone only the C2 section, and that was to go to R2. So now they're going from, rather than doing R2, they're doing R4. Ultimately, that request was withdrawn by the applicant after not receiving Planning Commission support for the request. As with any rezoning application, I'm displaying the 2030 future land use map from the current comprehensive plan. The subject property is outlined in red. As you can see, the map intends this area to be used as industrial. The land use class was chosen here due to the proximity of industrial properties to the northeast of this site, and also to the property's access to the KCS rail line. The request to rezone the property to R4 does conflict with the guidance of the future land use map. Here you see a potential development plan for the property that was provided by the applicant. So the request before you is only to rezone the property, not to approve the development plan. However, the plan does provide some insight on the applicant's motivation behind the requested R4 zoning. The plan appears to be 9 two-family dwellings on a single lot. This would require the rezone to R4 as the zoning density is calculated by the lot. So there would be more than 2 dwellings on one lot or parcel. The required zoning must be upsized to R4 for those additional units. The city staff has not endorsed this plan as meeting city code, and should the rezoning be approved, it will be likely that this plan will be changed to address technical comments, for instance. Finally, it should be emphasized that the developer in no way is tied to this specific concept plan. So should the zoning rights be granted, he could come back with an apartment complex or any such thing of that density, as long as it met the bulk and area standards of the proposed R4 zone. Here you see the site. Unlike with the zoning request from last year, the current proposal does include the wooded area that is shown to the north here, as I'm circling, as well as the drainage channel. Staff does have some concerns with the rezoning requests that are carried over from our review from the R2 zone from 2020. The primary concerns are as follows. One, the proposed zoning does invite development that would be out of character with the neighborhood. The proposed residences are shown in the potential development plan that are approximately 63% smaller than the residences in the neighborhood. We can see that from the photo that most of the dwellings in this area are larger and are on deeper lots, with the housing pushed closer to Washington Street rather than being pushed back. So secondly, the proposed rezone encourages infill construction that would break the prevailing land use pattern in the area and allow for development that is aligned, that allows for development to be aligned to South Washington Street, which may be considered out of character with that neighborhood. It also, due to the requested density, encourages housing to be closer to incompatible land uses such as the automobile repair business located to the east of the site, as you can see right there. Thirdly, we believe that the density does not fit with South Washington Street. The closest multifamily to this area is located on Lake Francis Drive. And if you're familiar with the city, Lake Francis Drive is nowhere near this area. It's an entirely different part of town. It's across the highway. So there just really is no R4 in this area, and so therefore it is really considered a textbook example of spot zoning, where a novel zoning is being placed on the site without any like zoning in the area. Essentially like you're putting a spot on a map. Here, this slide shows, and I showed this to you last year, but this just shows what the happens to the property when there's a 2-inch rain. As you can see, the drainage channel does fill up, and drainage is a concern through there, as we mentioned last time. So, you know, with the possibility of fencing or development or just anything that comes in on the site, it will constrict that flow down a little bit. Now, there probably will come back with a drainage plan that will address that, but there still is a potential for there to be an issue, and that's the whole purpose of showing that to you. We did receive a late email yesterday in opposition to the request. If you've not seen that, it is included in the updated Planning Commission packet. I did update that with that email. And then hopefully you saw a letter up at your place that was hand delivered just this afternoon, so we couldn't get it to you any sooner. But that one, I believe, was also in opposition of the request. So taking all these concerns into account, staff is recommending denial of the application, and we stand ready for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Is anyone in the audience representing the developer? Mr. Homeyer.
Yes, sir. Ron Homeyer, Civil Engineering, 701 South Mount Olive. Oh my goodness, where do I start? Obviously, I'm disappointed that staff has taken the position that they have taken with this project. Obviously, we did not get approval for the original subdivision project. There was concern about the location and proposal for the realignment of the ditch. So we went back, staff made a suggestion after the board meeting that Mr. Chavez considered doing a 4 or 5 lot single family project that would have accessed by way of at least 2 driveways off of Washington Street. And of course it was not something Mr. Chavez felt was going to be economically viable, so he did not pursue that. That's why you're looking at the request for the rezone, so he can do some duplexes on there. Staff has laid out some interesting facts, and I'm glad, well, while that picture's still up there, I guess I'll go ahead and talk about drainage since that has come up again. As you can see in the bottom left, where the ditch is next to Washington Street, how narrow the flow is. And if you look real hard in the top right corner where it's coming under Kenwood Street and that bridge, how narrow that flow is. The wide flow that you're seeing there just south, or just north, excuse me, of Kenwood is due to the fact the area is low and therefore it spreads out significantly. But that amount of flow easily will fit in a much narrower path or ditch, as is demonstrated by the lower left and what comes under the bridge. I think the bridge crossing there on Kenwood might have been updated either right before or right after that photo. We felt that the R4 multifamily zoning request was appropriate for that area because this is a transition zone. You've got commercial on the south side of Kenwood Street, and you've got single-family residential north of this property. You can cram the two next to each other, but in theoretical planning, you would have some kind of a transition zone where you would go from commercial to a higher density residential and into the lower density residential. Autumn Glen is one example where they have the commercial along 43 and then the duplexes and then single family. I guess you would say behind McDonald's back there, you've got commercial on the highway and then duplexes and such. So that's why we felt that this would be a reasonable request. Was a little bit surprised by the spot zoning comment. Because if you look at other examples in town, there's the Nottingham addition where you've got apartments that are nowhere near another apartment complex. You've got behind McDonald's some multifamily there in Hayden Edition. They're on Holly Street. It's nowhere near other apartments. So if those aren't spot zoning, then not sure how this can be a spot zone. Because if you take that definition, then you can't really have apartments anywhere, because you gotta come to a new area and start with them somewhere. So, anyway, I guess those were my main points. Be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Commissioners, do you have any questions of Mr. Homeyer?
Ron, I guess in your mind, if it wouldn't work in a less dense development, what kind of makes you think is it just a modified plan, or I mean, what?
The drainage structure that will have to be installed for the driveways is going to be expensive. If you're putting in one crossing for 8 or 9 duplexes, it's much more reasonable for that kind of project versus doing a very expensive structure for 1 or 2 residences, 3 at the most. And in my opinion, you do the one crossing versus 2 or 3, you're going to have less impact on drainage as well.
Kind of the scale of the project. Yeah.
Right.
Any other questions from commissioners? Ron, go over again and make my old dense head try to. I don't know whether you can or not. On the drainage
Yes, sir.
that's out there, and from what I've seen, you're not building all the way over to the property on the south side of the drainage ditch. What's going to happen to that drainage ditch that's up there by Kenwood on the east end where it's widened out at versus, are you going to do anything with that ditch, or just help me out here?
From Kenwood up to where the power lines are that go back to the body shop, basically would be untouched at this point. There's not enough usable land in there that could be reclaimed to try and put anything in there. So the idea would be to leave that portion of it completely alone, and then just channelize it from there parallel to the power line, and then parallel to Washington Street.
So by doing this, is that going to affect that area that's going to be left untouched? Is that going to cause that to spread out and come into the property on the west side of it, or into the property of the automotive center on the east side of it?
I mean, that's a requirement of the drainage manual that we not raise the water. Also a FEMA requirement that we not impact the upstream water. So it will have to be done in a way that it does not affect or increase any flooding on either of those properties. The body shop's not in any trouble. I'm sorry, I designed that a long time ago, so I know it's high enough. The existing house is the only thing that'll need to be looked at real close. But I'm pretty sure it can be done by putting in a flat enough ditch to where we actually get below the grade as we get to that transition point.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, do we know when the picture was taken? Because they did fix the bridge under Kenwood. I wondered if we know whether that did make any differences to what this picture shows, or is this picture after that and it shows how it is now?
I'll answer the first part of the question. I think Justin might answer the second part of that question. The first part, this was about exactly a year ago. If you recall, this went to the Planning Commission in May. I don't remember if you were on the commission back then. You weren't, okay. But yeah, I went to the commission May 2020. So I think this was probably in April. I remember that we had kind of a wet period last April, and so that was, we took advantage of a heavy rain event in the morning and went out and got a picture of it real quick, because we knew that we wanted to have that as part of the record of what was going on the property. So if anything happened after like mid-April last year with that culvert, then that would not be reflected in this picture. But Justin.
This is before the road was improved. I'd expect it to act pretty similarly for a 2-inch rain. We pretty much kind of matched what was there, was the intent, so.
Any other questions?
I guess in a situation like this, would the city normally work with the developer to try to find a solution? I hate to ping pong this deal back and forth, and I feel like they're trying to find a way to make it work. And maybe our single family conversation was the solution that we were able to provide, and probably is. But I guess, do you have any feedback there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. From our perspective, and I do respect Mr. Homeyer's comments regarding the spot zoning and the transitions and everything. But what our goal is to, if you look at this picture very closely, you see there is a what I would call a cadence in planning terms. And what that means is there's a set of buildings that goes straight like that, and that is the neighborhood. That's Washington Street. As you're going down Washington Street. And that cadence isn't quite in transition zone, in my opinion, because we have a house here. We have a house just out of the picture right there. And I believe maybe another house on that side. So this is a missing tooth, if you think of it that way. You have house, and you have an empty space, and then you have more houses. And so just from our perspective, it just makes sense to have more houses drawn out that would access onto Washington. I know economically that might not work for the developer, and we certainly empathize with that, but from a planning perspective, that is the best case scenario, because it continues that same development pattern that you already see in place, and I think it would be the least intrusive on the neighborhood in terms of the quality of life and just, the general aesthetics of what that would look like as you continue up and down Washington Street. So.
And to do that plan, we would need to rezone the current C2. Is that right? To execute that plan.
To execute this plan, we would want R2, obviously for single family, with a plat accompanying that R2, which is what was stated publicly last time this was reviewed, that the plat and the zoning would come together. And that plat would have individual lots coming in off like that with shared driveways or such to maximize, if you want to make them as narrow as possible, we would support that because, it's still keeping with the single family and doing that along the frontage of Washington Street. So.
Thank you.
Ron Homeyer again. I got one comment to make. That tree line down there that runs behind the body shop has a 12-inch sewer line running right along those trees. So it is just the right place to disrupt a nice sequence of lots through there. You basically have one lot that would be centered over that sewer line. So that is another obstacle that we're trying to work around. The proposal we've got has that sewer line underneath the driveway.
I know this is a proposal that's weighing heavy on all the commissioners' minds. Are there any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to find a way to try to help something. I'd like to be helpful to you guys, to your development process, Ron. I think you've done a good job, but, I don't know if this one's it. Just for me, I don't know if I can get on board with the increased density here. It's just a comment, I guess. But.
Are there any other comments? I'll still entertain a motion.
I
Mr.
recommend
Chairman, I
to-
move that we deny the RZ 21-02 rezoning development permit.
I have a motion to deny the zoning permit. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Smith? Smith?
Can you come back to me?
McKenzie?
Against?
Song?
Yes. Yes means deny the proposal.
Montgomery?
Yes.
Valley? McKinney?
Yes.
Smith?
This is an awful hard decision, just like all of us. But I'm going to vote yes. Motion is denied, or permit is denied. This will go to the board on May the 4th. Next item, City Comprehensive Plan Monthly Update.
I didn't really have any real remarks on this. I'm just presenting this as presented in the packet.
Get that there? They have the remarks that it'll go to the board as presented in the packet.
Yeah. I'd be happy to entertain any questions or answer any questions if you had any on that.
Glad to see us extend that survey period.
Yes.
Ben, it doesn't say how many surveys had been completed. Do you know roughly that number?
I do not, but I can try to find out for you. Yeah, I only know what's in that report. So.
Okay, any other comments on the city comprehensive plan? Next item is board approved permits. Ben?
Yes, so we're transitioning the agenda to board-approved permits. So you're looking at an annexation that is occurring right now off of Lawless Road. This went to the board of directors for its first reading on April the 6th. It will have its next reading a week from today on April 20th. And the proposal for this is to go to the R3 zone. Here's the future land use map. As you see, it's a mixture of low density and medium density categories, and so we've did a blending of that to kind of come up with a averaging house density per acre, and we believe that the R3 fits within that, especially when taking into account the approved development plan that you guys looked at, I believe, last year. To do the phases 2 through 5 of Lawless Ranch. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on that. It's going to the board. So.
Questions on that, on the annexation zoning? Okay, Ben.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, okay, there's no questions that,
Okay, are we moving on to the next item on the agenda?
moving on to the approved permits.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So we're on item G of the agenda. So we're going to roll through all these real quick, and then I'll just open up for questions at the end. These are all staff-approved permits, just to keep you informed. So what we're looking at here is a lot split that occurred at 402 Oak Hill Street. That was a split of a 0.16 acre lot into two, allowing for a new building on the west side of the house. Here's that lot split. And this is a smaller lot because it is in the H1 district, so that allows for the smaller size lots than you would normally have in like a 7,000 square foot lot. So moving on, we have another lot split. This is at 911 Highway 16. And this split off another lot from a mother-in-law unit that was actually in the back. And the idea here was to allow for a new house because the original house was damaged very severely in the tornado from a few years back. So this is going to allow for 2 units without having to change the zoning. The access to both will be off of this shared access easement that will allow access to both the two houses there. Next we have is another lot split. We had a lot of lot splits turned in. This one's out on Waukesha Road, just south of the city limits. And the idea here was to split this lot into 2 along an existing power line there. And here you see that as the 2 sets of lots there. The easement for the power line will stay the same. It's a 100-foot easement. That will be plenty of space for the utility crews to get in there to service that if they need to. We don't have any idea what the intended use or what the buyers want to do with either lot, but if it is developed, you will know about it. Then the last we have is a lot line adjustment. This is at 415 East University Street. It's adjusting several lots in the Siloam original district, or addition, excuse me. And this is the proposed split. We do have a newer version of it, but I didn't have time to get it on this presentation. But essentially, in concept, this is what's being done. So these lines are being taken out, these old lots here, and a new lot being put on the very end to coincide with some drainage area that they want to have separated out from the main house. And with that, I believe that is all I have for my presentations. Any questions?
Mr. Rose, I think I didn't see F2, so board approved permit, the second one, final plat permit. Was that in your presentation? Did I miss that?
Okay, yeah, that should have been taken off the agenda. I apologize. Yeah, that one's not ready to go. No, it's not ready to go yet. Still waiting on some stuff that could be finished. But thank you for bringing that up.
No problem, thank you. Got it.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.